founder and CEO of 29 Design Studio. We work with food, beverage, and agriculture brands around the country, but a lot really centrally located in upstate New York as well. And so we've had the pleasure of working with the commissary on a couple things, this being the first big event. Really excited to be here. So we're a creative agency, and we primarily do branding work, right? So we're the ones that are designing your packaging, we're helping you build your brand, understand how to use social media to leverage, your relationships with your customers. And so that's I think it's a great pairing for the perspectives that Frank and I are going to bring to the discussion tonight, just being so different with Frank, on the operations side more so, and mine kind of after your product is produced, as well as some of the collaborations that happen between both of those sides of the coin as you're getting your product onto a retail shelf. So in addition, I own some other companies too. One is co-working space, which is right around the corner from here. It's called Port 100, downtown near East and Alexander. So if anybody needs co-working space, we're filling up fast over there. And then I'm launching another company called Metro Collective, which will unite shared spaces like the co-working space and the commissary kitchen here across upstate New York. That's launching soon. So we would love to start just having everybody go around the room with a really brief introduction of your name and what your company is, or who you represent, or just really brief so we can go around and understand who's in the room, and then we'll kick off the presentation. Can we have you hired?
Hi, I'm David Casper, executive chef, entrepreneur, Presbyterian Home, Cottage Grove, and Freestone. I'm also the president of the Rochester Chapter Professional Chefs Association. We're involved with the sauce, so I'm going to learn how to model it.
Thank you.
Greg Lennon, my wife Elizabeth, we're from Silver Street, New York, about 40 minutes past Belmont, going west. And my wife came up with similar to a hummus. It's not a hummus, we don't use tahini in it, but it's a really good fried dip. We brought some with us today for everybody to try.
Looking forward to it.
I'm sorry?
Looking forward to it, yeah.
We're trying to get it to the next level.
I can help you broker the deal if you need.
Yeah, brokers in the room.
I'm Lorna Underwood. I own a Caribbean Heritage Restaurant over on Hummus. I started 3 years ago. December, it'll be 3 years. And we kind of like success. And I have a cake that I like to get to show.
Great. Thank you.
We're Certificate Montecaret. This is Spanish food-based seasoning. That is that you can use it and you'd like to try it and give it in the market.
Awesome. Thank you. And the husband.
Luke Coretta Craft Foods. I do a bunch of things, but right now I've got some higher end hot cocoa, Ecuadorian raw cacao products, as hot cocoa mixes, and then also spice mixes and a few other things. I actually just became a member of the commissary, I think officially last week or the week before, so I have some other plans as well for catering and that kind of thing, but right now it's something like that.
We can find you at the public market,
Yes,
right?
Rochester Public Market.
Awesome. Thank you.
My name's Rebecca Bello. I am the owner of a company called Sick Day Soups. I've been a member of the commissary since December, and we deliver frozen soups to your home whenever you don't feel good.
I'm Barb Glassman, I'm the support person from the commissary.
I'm Mona Ockenden, and I'm the founder of Mona Moon Naturals. We are a natural skincare company. Maureen told me you were here today, and I'm working on getting on shelves in the grocery stores. We create natural skincare using safe, natural ingredients that are recognizable and safe.
Husband, driver. Amen.
I'm Franca, I'm one of the designers at 29 Design Studio from Sport 40.
Nice job on the presentation, thank you.
Yes.
Hey all, I'm Saul Schuster. I'm from Headwater Food Hub. I work with your product quite a bit. Nice to see you. Yeah. I do a lot of my own foraging and also charcuterie curing, and hopefully can learn something about maybe doing those for people besides just my friends, family, loved ones.
All right, well,
Awesome.
we have a taste tester right here.
It sounds good for you.
It's that kind of thing right there.
Well, I'm Mary. I am from Salt, and I'm just really interested in food and food marketing in general, so I thought this would be an interesting opportunity to network and learn.
I'm Elizabeth Tuck. My husband and I own a maple syrup farm in Bristol, a food storage farm, and we're focusing on sustainability. We're putting in the first electric evaporator in New York State, and then I'm also an art director at
My name is Toby Butler. My wife just recently became a member of the commissary, but we own a catering and takeout restaurant called Northern Nova. My wife is originally from New Orleans, so it's all authentic New Orleans cuisine. And then I also own a conventions company. I have a patented product. It's where you put your finger foods and put condiments and you can dip. It's actually called Dip with DIPIT. So I'm interested in figuring out how we can maybe partner with both products in stores as standalone and as prefab. Thank you.
Alright, I'll stand up since I'm tucked in the corner. Hi, my name is Kayla. I'm the owner of Biscotti Brewers. Trying to market myself as Rochester's premier gluten-free bakery, bake shop. And eventually I'd like to see my wonderful biscotti on all the shelves of my business. That's what I'm doing.
She's also a member of the commissary and having an event here Friday evening. And her stuff is amazing, regardless if you're gluten free or not.
My name is Jermaine, owner of Hot Boy Sauce. We do food-based hot sauces and barbecue sauces. Member of the commissary kitchen. May now? May? And we're trying to get our product into shelves and wagons, major grocery stores.
Hey y'all, I'm Erica and I own the Brown Sugar Company and I bake cookies. So I have vegan cookies, regular cookies, and I'm working on a sugar-free cookie, and I think that I have it down. I didn't bring any sugar-free cookies, but I did bring like regular cookies, so y'all can like taste them and tell me what y'all really think. And I'm a member of the commissary since this summer. Yeah, this summer I've been a member. It's been really supportive. I've met like a lot of people, and I am really interested to see like how I currently package my product. How can I do it better, basically?
Great. Love it. And you do sell in some grocery stores, right? You're at Abundance,
Oh
right?
yeah, I am. I am in Abundance. I sell the vegan cookies in Abundance, and then I also sell the regular cookies. You can always find them at Palermo's when they have them. Huh? I said I'm a cookie monster.
My name's Jason, this is my wife Angelina. We are the owners of Pop Rock, the first cereal bar and comic book shop here in town. And we have several brands that we're launching shortly, as well as a place called Space, which is going to be a pop-up space for entrepreneurs. Think of it as an Airbnb for entrepreneurs. There'll be a full kitchen, full bar, and 1,500 square feet to do fun stuff in. So if anybody's interested in that, I'd love to share some of that with you afterwards. And I'm excited to be here. Talk to you guys.
I'm Alex. I own Rose Creates. I do celebration cakes, wedding cakes. I'm a member of the commissary. I've been a member since early May.
Great. And then I think you're the only one we missed.
Yeah, hi, my name's Dylan. I'm currently in the process of becoming a member of the commissary. A couple months ago, I started a home-based baking company, focusing primarily on like gourmet cookies. And I'm hoping to expand into a business model similar to like insomnia cookies, but with more gourmet, flair.
We get everybody? Excellent. Thank you for those introductions. Hopefully that helps, certainly helps us understand who's in the room, but also helps you meet each other, right? I mean, some of you said this is a networking event and that's intentional, right? So without further ado, you're the food maker,
Start, yeah,
so
the
why
food
don't you
maker.
start with this one?
Alright, so we actually did a presentation a couple years ago, so I took some slides from that, because I think some of these points are important. Like I said, when I was at the desk, I was in R&D, test a lot of product, we looked at a lot of product, people brought their stuff in, did a lot of cuttings, wine cuttings. And the one thing that I tell everybody, a lot of people.
Lingo, cuttings, tasting.
Oh, sorry, tasting, yeah, so you're just basically tasting your product against maybe something else, or different versions, or, let me know that I'm not talking loud enough. So, you know, your recipe obviously has to be good, and a lot of people have a lot of passion, and they believe that they have the best product that they can make, but I always suggest to do what we call blind cuttings, and blind cutting is putting your product out against others that are like it in the marketplace, and really get some feedback on people's opinion of your product versus somebody else's, without telling them which is which. That's really important. I know that, and you know, everybody, you know, my mom makes the best sauce in the world. I fear the day that my mom puts 3 sauces on the table and says, I want you to tell me which one is the best one. But it's you know, usually the feedback is from friends and family, and I think that it's important because all it's going to do is really help you dial in the best product that really is liked by most people. So I think that's an important step. Make sure it's you know, special, obviously, and I think that's pretty much this whole slide. There's a little fancy recipe there.
So the other point that I want to make about the feedback loop, and so to Frank's point about, you know, saying, hey, can you taste this? What do you think? Right, from somebody who you're close to is one thing, and they're just saying, oh, it's really good, I love it. But you know, adding that neutrality to it is at a whole other level. But when it comes to the feedback loop and being open to criticism, think about what kind of steps can you put in place that will help the people that are sampling your product give you feedback in a way that they're going to feel comfortable, right? That can you do an anonymous fill this out type survey, right? Where they're not like, oh, Frank's going to know I didn't like that new flavor of hummus, and how am I going to tell him, right? There's a lot of feelings that come in with all of that. Creating a safe way for your customers to give you feedback without them feeling like they're going to hurt your feelings, and without you feeling like, oh, Aunt Susie said she liked the hummus. Now she's saying it's got too much lemon in it, you know, whatever it is. Put it in a feedback loop where you can take that in a neutral way, and your customers or the people, your friends or whoever it is going to feel comfortable sharing that.
Like I said, it's only going to make it better. So it's going to help you improve it, and really see how you know, stand against what's out there, what's available.
Right. And the other thing about taste, and Frank and I talked about this, your customer won't buy from you again if it doesn't taste good, right? So you get one chance for it to nail it, especially when it gets on that shelf in the grocery store. Like, oh, I'll try this. This looks cool. I'll try this for the first time, right? You bring it home and you're like, cool. You're never gonna buy that again until you see that flag that says new taste or new flavor or something like that, right? It takes so much more effort to reconvert that customer after they've tasted it and they really didn't love it. So work those kinks out beforehand, because the taste is the primary buying indicator for what a customer is looking for to re-buy from you, that it really tasted good. Questions about taste, recipes,
Or ideas, and you know, after this we could always follow up with ideas if you have thoughts on which you want to try or which you want to do. And we can also help taste product with you.
Yeah.
I look like it's coffee there.
So the point in this slide here was, you know, to show Frank and my beautiful face, right? But to explain the fact that we bring very different perspectives to this conversation. And so we're collaborating in this event so that we can talk to different sides of the point. We will share this presentation afterward, by the way, just, you know, it's mostly talking points, but to kind of trigger your memory. So Frank from the operations side, myself from the branding side, and that sort of post-production makes us a really good pair. So if you're not great at standing up on stage, standing behind that table at the farmer's market and pitching your product, talking to your customer with confidence, find someone who is, right, and pair up with them. And maybe you're great at social media, the stuff behind the scenes. You can do that for them, and they can represent you at the farmer's market with a shared table. Right, so things like that. Know what you're great at and know what you're not great at, and find people that you can partner up with so that you can collaborate on things like that. you wanna talk about charisma and personality? I mean, I think for that one, we were talking about the table.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's kind of what you just spoke to. It's really to catch somebody's attention, it's personality. And you know, when you go to a farmer's market, don't be afraid to flood the table with food, product.
Yeah, right.
I'll be honest with you, a bunch of pamphlets, and it doesn't really impress me. You know, I'm gonna walk through a farmer's market. You know, people don't want literature, they wanna eat, they wanna snack, they wanna try your product. So keep that in mind, you know, put that stuff behind the scenes, give something out that, you know, is important, a menu or a list of products that you have at some point. But really just kind of, you know, engage that and let them try your product, give it away. And
Yeah.
I can't say this enough, try to give away as much as you can, let people try the product, get it in their mouth. Then they're gonna fall in love with it, and then they're gonna wanna buy it, and then that's what's gonna really help with the sale.
And on this one with pitching, like people fall in love with your personality before your product. You talked about that a little bit in terms of personality and charisma, right? You've got to be a bit of a show person, but when it comes to pitching the buyer too, you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so the buyer, and I don't know if the slides after this really dig into that a little bit more. So if you really are lucky enough, so we ended up in the store because Chris, our founder, was at the farmer's market with his wife in Ithaca, and the Wegmans buyer came and tasted the product and fell in love with it.
At the farmer's market.
At the farmer's market, and it went into the Ithaca Wegmans, the only one. And you know, I'm not sure if anybody knows anything about velocities, but you know, if you're selling 20, 30, 40 units a week, that's good in this category. He was selling over 1,000 units of Ithaca hummus a week in that store. It was a huge hit. And that's really what led to adding other stores. Now all of a sudden we're in half of the Wegmans stores, then all the Wegmans stores. And it did really well because, you know, we believe it's a good product. We have proof. I mean, we have people that keep buying it, so that's a good sign. But he had a product that was ready to be on the shelf.
And he knew how to pitch it, right?
And he knew how to pitch it, exactly. He knew how to pitch it, he talked to them, he's got a lot of charisma. And the buyer looked at it, and it didn't have, you know, a piece of duct tape on it that said hummus. It had a label on there with a UPC code. It was ready to be sold. That's really what the buyer's looking for. Are you really ready to be on the shelf? Because if it's just a piece of tape, you're probably not ready for the store yet.
Yeah.
And so if you're ready and wanting that, try to get those steps done ahead of time. Be ready, because it's all it takes is one buyer to walk by and love your product, and before you know it, you're in the store.
Yeah. And actually, Leap Foods is a client of ours. They make, they grow organic superfood mushrooms. I mean, you know, they're a headwater. So they got into Wegmans because they got on the menu at Next Door, and Danny Wegman ate something on the menu at Next Door and said, we've got to get these into the store. And now they have 3 SKUs and most of the Wegman stores in the greater Rochester region. So know your pitch.
Top 3 SKUs.
Yes, okay, great. So we have more information on that later, but a SKU is a unit, basically. We'll talk,
UPC, yeah.
like the UPC code or SKU, those are interchangeable, yeah.
So do you recommend get a SKU even though if you're early stage on your labels?
So when
Getting
is
the
the right
UPC
time to
code?
get the UPC code?
I don't think it's never, I mean, if you're real serious about going and being in retail, I would get it done. Design a label, put the nutritional panel on there, the ingredient statement on there, the UPC, because what if you get that opportunity all of a sudden? And you're not ready with that part, unfortunately, they're not gonna wait for you. If you're ready to go and you can react in a couple weeks, they'll be like, okay, we can do this, we can make it work. If you say, I gotta go get a UPC number, and they're gonna probably say, you know what, we have a short window here, it's not, so I would recommend it.
Or they might lose interest.
Yeah, they could lose interest.
I'll just chime in as not someone who's an expert in the field. My profession, my husband is in the food industry, and he has a line of barbecue sauce. And I went on GS1 code, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and did the UPC codes for him. So
Yeah.
it does not take an expert to do it. I think I did it in about half an hour. I don't even remember what the cost was, but for him it wasn't like, oh, that's prohibitively expensive.
Right.
Because it's an investment in your business, and it's something you do want.
So
Yeah,
number
exactly.
6.
Yeah, so these hummuses are gonna have a different. Yeah, because they need to track which one's selling well, which one isn't.
And just so everybody knows, the resources are here to help you with that.
Yeah.
So if.
Me needing that.
Yeah. If, you know.
Or we can figure it out.
Exactly, if
Yeah.
you're taking notes, like, oh geez, how do I figure this out? We'll help you.
Yeah.
You know, we put our contact information down. I will tell you that a couple little quirks with the UPC, especially when you're starting and you're not quite sure of the finished package. If you significantly, when I say significantly, it could be like plus or minus 20% of the weight. If that changes, you have to get a new UPC number for that product. So you kind of want to get to the point where you're like, this is going to be the final package. I'm going to assign the UPC to that. Now, if you do it and you change the package a little bit, not a big deal. Again, we can kind of talk through that. If you guys are like, I'm not sure, should I really get it? Maybe wait a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's not the first thing to do in your packaging process, but, you know, you don't have to wait until it's the very last thing. Did you have something?
Kayla asked the question, yeah.
Great. We're gonna talk a little bit more about buyer relationships. I mean, that's kind of the heart of the conversation, right? So we're gonna go into that a little bit later in the presentation, but food incubators are great. So Giovanni and Frank talked a little bit about the one, Ithaca Hummus went through the Giovanni incubator. There's also Stacy's Rise project. Perfect Granola is a local company that went through Stacy's Rise project. But search by your niche, right? So look around for like incubators. Now, I also understand that not everybody can participate in an incubator, right? There are a lot of work to apply for, there are a lot of work to get into, and there are a lot of work to participate in. And not everybody can take that time, effort, and energy away from, you know, if this is a side gig, like taking that time away from their regular full-time job to dedicate to the time in an incubator. But again, what we're talking about here is your path to getting on the retail shelf. When you are serious about, I am ready to take this company full-time, I am ready to, you know, start continuing to leverage this, look at an incubator and just explore it. Is it gonna solve some of the challenges that you have in an intense way, right? That's gonna help you sort of leap to the head of the pack. So you wanna talk about the Giovanni one?
So, and you probably want to look at something like this when you're starting to get into stores, maybe you have a handful, a dozen, 24. The programs are amazing. We were, you know, again, it was a couple of years ago, we were still small. We applied for the Giovanni thing, you gotta send a video, do all kinds of stuff. But the benefit to us, I mean, they gave us $25,000, no strings attached. They paid for all of our travel. They housed us in New York City in Soho for the entire week, 1 week every month for 4 months straight. We got to meet with their entire executive team at all these different meetings, and you learn a lot. And they're great people. It happened to be Giovanni, amazing. And we're actually gonna have a reunion in a couple weeks. They like want to bring you back and talk about your success. I know. Well, I can't. But it was a great program. We learned a lot. I mean, I've been in the business a long time, and I still learned a lot. And I think there was a lot of laughs. There was a lot of tears. There was 6 companies as part of our little cohort, and they, you know, it gets emotional at times because it's really there's a lot of emotion in running a business. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of questions you want to ask. You're afraid to ask, and it just happens. Everybody's really tight. Everybody's going through the same thing. And it really is a nice way to learn and kind of get to the next. They're always there to support. I feel like the commissary is like a lot like that. This is like an incubator. Everybody's helping each other, so you kind of have that, which is nice.
Yep. And there's other, you know, dedicated incubators too. I mean, obviously for all of you, the commissary kitchen is great. There's other types of incubator programs you can go through. Nextcore has some grant funding through their incubator programs, right? So just search around in your area when in doubt, you know, leverage the resources that you currently have here at the commissary.
And
another one.
Oh, just real quick, and this isn't an investment. This is
right.
They're not asking for anything. They're actually investing in helping you. They're paying it forward. That's right. The beauty of it.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say the Grow New York competition is going on now. So we've helped clients for the last 2 years apply and actually take home prizes in that competition. So that one is run by some local upstate New York economic development institutions. Our client Real Eats won $1 million in year 1. Leap Foods, the mushroom company I mentioned, they took home $250,000 last year in the competition. We're in the 3rd year now. Hopefully that will continue, but that's another one that's hyper local. That's right here. benefit of that, we all know this region really well, and that program is a lot about being deeply rooted in the Grow New York region, which basically is a section of upstate New York. So that's something that might be kind of interesting for you, for some of you to look at too. The caveat to that is like that's also, you know, when you get to more significant scale, you've got to be going nationwide for that to kind of make sense.
And go to the event. It's free. It's
Totally.
free.
Yeah, or it's, I think it's low cost, or you can stream it online for a very low cost. Yes,
Yeah.
look and watch how those companies pitch. That's a food and ag tech competition. How do those companies talk about their product? How do they talk about their growth plans? How do they, you know, what do their financials look like? Because they're talking about their financial growth, how many employees they're gonna need. Also Shark Tank, watch
Yeah.
that. Like,
And you can also have a table, you can have a table at the event. You don't have to be a part of Grow New York.
Right.
There's an event space where you can have a table, and there's a lot of pretty important people at this event.
Absolutely.
A lot of buyers, a lot of, you know,
Yes.
politicians, if you like those people. Anyways, it's a good event to attend, here's.
So this, and this is more your territory, Frank. You wanna
Yeah.
talk through these?
So this, we kind of put this up and left this from my previous slide. People start to think about, should I be talking to a co-packer? You talked about sauce. And usually somebody like that wants to do something like that, I'll really talk through really what it's gonna take to bottle your own sauce. This is a great place to do it. You're starting off small, you're making X amount of product. It's gonna get to a point where you may wanna talk to a manufacturer, co-packer. Something I can help with, find a co-packer for you. There's small, medium, large. And you know, these are just some things that, again, you'll get a copy of the presentation, but things you should know about your product that they're gonna ask, whether it's a liquid, a solid, refrigerated, shelf stable, you know, your process, is it validated? Have you done a shelf life study on your product? A retailer's gonna ask those questions too. You're gonna have to fill out these fancy forms, and it's gonna ask you questions. You know, you're gonna sign your name to it. You wanna be sure you've done your work and make sure that.
Let me just translate those two for a second on what does it mean to validate a process and validate a shelf life. Those are some things that Cornell can do for you, and the commissary can help with those relationships. When it means validating your process is your step from the way that you produce the product done in a safe manner. That's validation of the process. And then shelf life, you know, how do we know that you say it's got a shelf life of 10 days? How do you know that, right? So Cornell, again, can help you understand what your shelf life is.
And just to pipe up for commissary members or prospective commissary members, I know Hector and Marilyn just went through this process where we have a great relationship with our inspector from the Department of Ag and Markets. So if you're not regulated by the Department of Health for your product, you have a true packaged food product, you're regulated by the Department of Ag and Markets. We find the easiest thing to do is to call up Jason, our inspector, and say, this is my product. Do you think I need to call Cornell for a scheduled process or not? And then he gives you his response, and that's that. And we do have, if you're ever looking on our website and are looking through that really boring document that's about all the required permits and documents, it gives a very quick run through of generally what does and doesn't require a scheduled process. And the people at Cornell are wonderful. Yes, they are food scientists, but they can speak to you like you're not a scientist. And they're great.
They're very friendly, helpful.
Yep.
When they make an inspection for a product, they recommended Cornell for 6 months.
Oh, great. Good.
They, what?
The inspector
Jason.
recommended after 6 months to send my product to Cornell.
Oh, okay, so it's not required but recommended.
Recommend that, yes.
Got it, okay.
We wanna do it, you know?
Yeah.
Right, so, yeah, Elizabeth is saying it's different with spices, it's different with all products. You might not necessarily need that, you might not need to go through that. I have a client that the shelf life was incredibly important to them, but they didn't have to go through, the, like, USDA for their packaging, right? So those are all different. Sometimes you go through Ag and Markets, sometimes you go through the USDA in terms of the regulation of what's on your packaging. And it really depends on what your product is and where it's gonna be sold, how it's gonna be sold. Are you going direct to consumer versus on the shelf? The rules are all different based on, for these things, depending on what your product is.
And Laura brought up a great point. And you have somebody who's been doing this for so long, they're gonna know the level of risk your product has. They're gonna know whether or not, you know what, this is, you're freezing it, nothing's gonna happen. Or your spices, nothing's
Right.
gonna, you know, so it's great to have that. And that's where I would start. That's a great
Yeah.
place to start.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
What's the cost associated with some of that stuff like that?
Believe it or not, it's not that bad. It's not that expensive. I mean, to do a validation, I want to say it's like, depends on what it is. Oh, he's got a.
I talked to Cornell today, and they said for $80 it would be 8 to 12 weeks. If you want to expedite it for $160, 4 to 6 weeks.
That's for which
That's
part?
the Cornell.
Scheduled process.
Yeah, checking the process.
Okay.
And that is, depending on what it is. If it's a sauce, he's got a high acid sauce. They've done this a million times. It's pretty reasonable. If you were doing something, a low acid product, like a soup, and you wanted to put it in a jar or a can, that might get a little expensive. Because then there's a lot more risk there, there's more studies that they need to do, so it really is product dependent. It might get a little expensive with the shelf life study. If you want to really see you know, how long something lasts, if it's bread, and say, okay, how long is this bread gonna last before it goes bad?
Right.
That could get,
How long?
Right. How long is it good for?
Can you guys repeat Marilyn's question?
She's
So they will need a certificate that your product is, has this shelf life. So because at the stores, if you want to sell at stores, they will ask you about this.
Right.
So for example, mine is refrigerated and frozen,
Okay.
so
Right.
they will determine that.
Sure.
Right,
and
so-
it depends on if you cook it, if you don't cook it.
It has to be,
Right.
it's a cook-based seasoning, so it's used to taste.
It's used to cook, but do you actually cook it?
No.
No, you don't.
You're selling it
See, that's
to
gonna,
consumer.
that's going to limit your shelf life. Because you're not treating it in any way, you're not treating it for, you know, you're not getting rid of any bacteria really. If you're making it fresh, it's gonna be limited. Now, if you freeze it, it'll probably last a long time.
So, schedule process, which I've heard before, and I know that has to do with, you know, figuring things out. Is this stuff here part of the schedule process, or are these separate, is this a separate thing from the schedule
Validation,
process?
he's just using a different term, it's the same thing.
So this is the same thing, so this is all part of it?
Right, so this
You're validating
process,
the process.
right, validation of the schedule process is what we're talking about with that. Yeah, those are all great questions.
It took me about 4 years to remember.
This is great. Spec, you want to keep going specs
Yeah.
and volume and.
Yeah, so specs, obviously, ingredients, packaging, you're dealing with a co-packer, you wanna try to put some parameters in place, you know, you're trusting them with your formula, you're giving them 10 ingredients to put in there, some different levels, but there's some things that, and I can help you with this. You know, what should I be thinking about asking the co-packer to be checking to make sure that it's in spec, you know, falls within those parameters, bricks and viscosity and all that stuff. You guys might be a little earlier for that, but maybe if you use your co-packer.
I want to make a comment because most of us, you know, when we make a product and we think, oh, this is going to be good, and everybody can make it, any company will make it. Sometimes our recipe won't make it to the final package, and you have to change your recipe.
Yes.
in order to
Yes.
sell it. So it is not just you, so you have to think on that.
Right, so she's saying that sometimes the recipe that you have, that you made your product with, when you go to scale it, you go to hire a co-packer, hey, this is how I want you to make my product, here's the recipe, put it in the Bible. And they say, no, I can't do it like that, for whatever reason. They can't do that many steps, or there's, you know, some rule that doesn't work for that, right? So there are different things that might change with your co-packer. Just to make sure we all understand that term too, a co-packer is somebody that is gonna package your product for you, right? So I made a food product, I have the recipe, and this is how I wanna make it. I've been making it at home, and then I went to the commissary kitchen, and now I want you to make it for me. Here's my recipe, this is the bottle I put it in. They make it for you at scale, so at larger volumes on your behalf, and you pay them a fee to do that. The more complex that co-packing process is, the more steps it takes, the more expensive it might be. You got a bottle that's hard to source, you know, you're gonna pay more for that. You know, there's various things that are gonna change based on the co-packer. there's one other example that I want to just give before you go on. So there was a woman that I met at a startup grind event last year. It was a food pitch battle. Her name is Megan Meza, and she is a bandita, like a cold horchata.
That's how
product.
we first met too.
Yeah, yeah. So she worked with Cornell to take her product from what she was making at home and selling at the farmer's market. She wanted to scale that up and work with Cornell to refine the recipe so that it could be co-packed in bottles with a partner. So it took her, I mean, it's a Latina product, and there's a very particular flavor to it. It took her multiple trips. She lives in New York City, multiple trips over to Geneva to refine that recipe. What does it taste like when it comes out at the end? Because exactly like you said, they had to change her recipe to adhere to the right kind of production that they could do that was safe with the scheduled process that Cornell would approve for a safe end result. So it takes some time at times, you know, like it's not just, hey, I'm gonna call Cornell and they're gonna give me the scheduled process. There might be some back and forth as you scale.
And I'll add, because, you know, co-packers is probably looking a little bit down the road for most of you folks. But it's not a bad idea, you know, your co-packer could be your worker. And you know, Becky makes great soups, you know, she might not be able to be here every day making those soups. How does she ensure that whoever's making them is making them like she makes them?
Right.
And so there's a couple of things that you can do. You might not need a salt meter and a Brix meter, but a couple of things, well, I think that most of you rely on taste and look. That's you know, you're the chef. Is somebody that's gonna walk in, do the same thing? I mean, can you rely on that person to do that? Maybe, maybe not. But what I usually recommend is have a gold standard. Make a batch of chicken noodle soup and have 20 of them. And you have them frozen, and so that when somebody comes and makes it, or you want to check against the gold standard, now you have a spec. You have the gold standard that somebody can check against. So there's things you can do to ensure there's consistency, even when you're not using a co-pack.
Right.
If it's just your restaurant or.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that's a great advice for anybody in food service, right? We all know how much we hate it when we go to a restaurant and we had a certain expectation based on our last visit, and now we have something else this time based on portion or taste or presentation or whatever, so.
Yes.
That's just good advice, period. And then a shameless plug for the commissary here too, right? As we're talking about co-packers, you know, before facilities like the commissary existed, and polyglutaminyl tomato sauce, pasta sauce is the example that I use. He was making it at home. He saved up, I think, $10,000 to go to a co-packer for the first time, and they were going to do, you know, pallets worth of his sauce. And the translation of what he made at home in one stock pot versus what they make there in, you know, like what we have back here, even bigger, 60-gallon, 100-gallon, whatever it might be, it tasted way too sweet. There was something about, you know, the acid from the tomato and the sweet, and it was all garbage. So we couldn't sell it, right? Because this wasn't his product, because you're not going to get a second chance, right? When somebody tastes this doesn't taste good. So he says, I wish the commissary existed when he launched, because it gives you that graduated step. Right. You don't have to leap from home kitchen to co-packer.
Right, with thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yep, that you can get your scheduled process, you can sell, you can get a UPC code, you know, if anybody wants to take a tour afterwards, we have the equipment for you to do it at a bigger scale than you can at home. Perhaps you can sell it legally too because of that, and then that's gonna get you that much closer to having a good experience when you're ready to go back home.
Yes. Yep. Excellent. Here and then here.
So we just went through the Cornell process and got validated. When we go to scale and so you go into a co-packer, you have to go through the Cornell process again at that point.
Yeah, you should have.
They should be able to. We're giving you parameters, heat, temperature, time. We're giving you parameters that any co-packer should be. Now, if they say, we can't cook your product, or we don't have this capability, we need to tweak this, so you go back to Cornell and say, well, they don't have a steam capper, and you're saying, use a steam capper. So you can kind of fine tune it, but for the most part, you should be good. Especially with your products, they're pretty safe.
Just to add sometimes, your restaurant can, if you have any
Absolutely, yep.
Scoville units on pepper, huge. People don't even think about that. And it's,
Yeah, sometimes you don't think
yeah,
about
and
it.
volatile oils and spices. Yep. Yeah.
Didn't change.
Oh, you guys have been going hypercard?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Water activity content?
Yep.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. He wanted a higher water
Yeah.
activity, yeah. That's,
And that was,
yeah.
that was a.
And for that part of
Yeah, exactly.
Out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how HPP is very effective on high water for process, yeah.
Let's touch on distribution. Frank mentioned that River Valley Foods is one of your favorites. A good
Yeah,
local
they're
company.
formerly Caballero brothers. No relation, they're the wealthy Caballeros. Not so wealthy. But they've always been fantastic. They're a great company. Even today, they sold it. River Valley owns it. Everybody refers to them as Caballero still, so somebody may say Caballero. Great relationship with Wegmans. They do shows, they do events where they invite people in to showcase their products. Keep an eye out for that, take that name down. They're a great local, they're Western New York, one of the best, in my opinion, to bring your product right to shelf. And then they have a great relationship with Wegmans.
So the other thing about working with a distributor, right, is there's pros and cons to that. You want to talk about some of the pitfalls of working with a distributor?
Yeah, so a distributor, for the most part, they're not gonna really go out and sell your product. People think, oh, I'm a distributor now, I can just hang out. Yeah.
That's a broker, so because it's always a broker and a distributor is different.
They are different.
So, yeah, so we have to get first a broker to get a distributor, right? With the broker,
Yeah, that's a good way to start with a broker. It'd be great to start with a buyer, at a store, where he's just gonna say, use this distributor and I'll take your product, and now you don't even have a broker for it, and you just save 5%.
Yeah.
But a broker, and you're gonna pay around 5% for a broker. He's your salesperson. A lot of them aren't very good. A lot of them are very good. Depends. They specialize in certain things, so you kind of want to. And again, I can help if somebody wants to talk to a broker. I can certainly help arrange for that. There's a lot of them that are pretty good ones out there. But you
Yes, exactly. They pick.
Well, but like I said, if you're lucky enough, it's hard to get to a buyer.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers, they want to talk to a broker who represents 20 things.
They can have
They
one
just say
conversation.
one meeting, one meeting, and they just talk
And a
to
buyer
them.
represents one organization, like a buyer, like a buyer. And most often, a department at that retailer, right? So there'll be a Wegmans buyer for the produce department and a different buyer for the bakery and a different buyer for frozen foods, right? Those buyers are often different people.
And we talked a little bit about the criticism and the feedback. I just talked to the Wegmans buyer before this gathering, and he told me he didn't like our new flavor.
The everything bagel?
Yeah.
You should have
I know, I didn't have any in the fridge.
You could have done the
I
cutting.
said, I don't like it, I think ours is better. Okay, good.
NDAs, formulas, and.
Yeah, NDAs are important, non-disclosure agreements. You can find them online, pretty basic information. It's kind of a mutual agreement. If you're gonna hand your recipe to somebody,
That's for the relationship with the co-packers,
Yeah.
to have an NDA.
anybody that wants to, Cornell you can trust, obviously. They're probably, I don't know, they might even have an NDA. Cornell.
I think they
No,
do.
Do they? Okay. But yeah, you don't wanna hand that over to anybody, really. That's the value of the business right there, really, is your formula.
Speak also though about, who owns your recipe.
So if you bring them the recipe, and that's negotiable, really. But if you bring them a recipe and you're asking somebody to make it for you, it's yours. It's your recipe. You're breaking it to them. You sign an NDA, there's an agreement. If you go to a co-packer and say, hey, I want to come out with a sauce, and I really don't care about, what the formula is, I just have a great brand and an idea, most of the time they're gonna own the recipes. And you can, what's that?
Does that mean they own a piece of that they're gonna take a percentage?
You just can't then take that product, that recipe, and go to another co-packer, because their recipe.
You'll never know what the
Not your
formula is,
recipe.
really.
They're not gonna tell you what it's like, 5% of this and 3% of that, you know, they're just like, this is the product, doesn't matter what's in it. You put your label on it.
I'll give you the quick rundown of the advantages and disadvantages. Because I did a lot of it, we sold a lot, we call it private label. We had plain sauce that we sold a lot of people. So they don't know the recipe, so they can't just go to another co-packer and run it because they don't know what it is, one. And two, they don't get anything more out of it, they just own the formula, but it's a very efficient formula that they run. You get the advantage of a less expensive formula. And people think, well, it's because it's cheap and it's because, not necessarily, it's just that they run a lot of it. And volume is important, and that brings cost way down. So, that's the advantage, really, you're getting a low cost. If you don't, believe it or not, I just got a call from, if anybody knows Judge Caprio, does anybody know Judge Caprio? He's the famous judge online, the old Italian guy. Yeah. That's what's cool about what I do. He called me because he wanted to come on a line of sauces. And I'm like, okay, cool. Here I'm thinking this guy's got a freaking, list of sauces that he makes on Sunday. He's like, I don't have any recipes. I don't care. We have a brand.
He wants to put his face on it.
And he wants to put his face on it. I couldn't believe it, actually. I'm like, well, you're an old Italian guy. You should have at least something. Go to a co-packer with at least, let me give you a recipe. So I was explaining this to him. I'm like, what the risk is, you're gonna go to a co-packer and get a standard formula.
Right.
You're not gonna be able to go anywhere else with it, one. And two, it's like, well, it's gonna be inexpensive to great. Three, it is probably gonna be right next to your product in the store. Because they're gonna sell it to Wegmans or they're gonna sell it to Tops, the same recipe.
Right.
So you're gonna have Judge Caprio sauce with a formula that's sitting next to it that's exactly the same. It's not your unique recipe.
Does that make sense to everybody, what he's talking about there?
Because it's just an everyday standard recipe.
Yeah.
I just want to add a note to this board as well, this slide as well. I'm the protein buyer for Headwater Foods, so I do all the protein, a lot of value-add protein as well. What's becoming more and more important, I've noticed to my buyers, my customers, is definitely sourcing. And I think it's under spec. I'd say attributes and sourcing is really important nowadays to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've noticed about more and more. Pricing as well. I think whenever I'm onboarding a vendor, it's one of the first things I go to before I even just to see if it's like that's kind of a get through the door kind of thing.
You guys do a great job with that. You guys have a lot of really good sources.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Especially that hummus.
Yes. Some of the best around.
And Eric, you guys are gonna talk about also at some point, in terms of labeling, what you can legally say and what.
Yep, we've got a couple slides dedicated to that.
Related to that.
We're just about at 7 o'clock. How's everybody doing?
If anybody needs the bathrooms, they're around the corner, and you don't need like a fob to get it, even though it looks like it.
You gotta push it over. Everybody always does this and says it's locked. Well, just push it.
Oh. All right, so we've touched on some of this already. How do I get the attention of a buyer, and how do I get my product on the shelf? We've talked about working with brokers. We've talked about working with distributors. We've talked about selling at the public market or the farmer's market. Attending food shows is also kind of an interesting thing, and it's expensive to get a table at a big food show, like the specialty foods, fancy food show. It's very expensive, to get a spot, design your booth, the whole thing. There's a lot of price to it.
The minimum is $5,000.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's
They're gonna put you in the back of the building.
Yeah, right. So you can go to the fancy food show with postcards in your jacket pocket, and you walk the floor. You can go walk the floor and still promote your product, market your product to people that you meet. You gotta be one hell of a hustler, networker, to meet people and make those connections. But you can go and experience the show, see how other companies are talking about their product, what they're exhibiting, learn from them, see how they're presenting themselves, take all of that knowledge and observation back to the farmer's market. And sure, if you've got a product that,
Chris actually did a few years ago. He brought a backpack of hummus and threw it away.
Yeah, they canceled this year.
Yeah, they canceled this year, yeah.
Well, Expo East is going on next week. A lot of people aren't gonna go to the show. If you're on board, Expo East is next week. You can buy a ticket, and it's a great food show. You see a lot of different products.
New York?
It's in Philly. It's in Philly. I love the fancy food show, one of my personal favorites, a lot of unique stuff. Different countries come in, there's an Italian section, a Mexican section, it's amazing. What's also really nice about the fancy food show is there's a lot of really good distributors that are showcasing multiple products that you could talk to and say, hey, I need somebody to cover me in Western New York, what areas do you cover?
Yep.
If their product line aligns with your products, that's who you want to be in business with, right? You don't want to go to a distributor who sells sugar and salt and you have something unique as yours, you know? But there could be some that really cater to your type of product. And if you have a sample of it and show them, they're gonna, we can help you with this, we can distribute it, we have some money. And I don't want to say they don't help you get into different places, they will, but don't rely on it.
They're not your sales team.
Right.
They're there to help you, but they're not your only sales team. So fancy food show is great, like I said. Buy a ticket first, walk the floor, bring some samples, bring some postcards of your product, business cards, and network the heck out of it. Or just go observe, right? Like whatever your comfort level is to start, but go to those shows, you'll learn a lot. We were talking about fancy food shows, and Frank goes state fair.
Yeah, state fair, yeah. It's another good.
So what can you do to take what you're currently doing to the next level? You go farmers market, state fair, maybe then you're walking the floor, fancy food show. We talked about local distributors, and what Frank said too about they sometimes have events where people can showcase their products. So keep an eye out for those from some of the distributors. We talked about a buyer might suggest their own distributors, networking contacts and connections. Everyone in this room should be ready to hand out their business card to everyone in this room, right? You never know who you're gonna meet, or hey, I met this person. I wonder if this person can help me with this thing. You never know what kind of opportunities are gonna shake out like that, right? So, always be networking. Samples, buyers, restaurant owners, care packages. You want to talk about that?
This is huge. I can't stress this enough. And I thought, our owner people were crazy for, you're just flooding buyers with care packages. This is huge. If you can, and especially if you can find something out about the buyer, if anybody follows Gary Vee, this is his advice. If you can find something out about the buyer that's personal to them, they're a huge Buffalo Bills fan, throw a Buffalo Bills keychain. Get their attention, let them remember you, give them your products, let them try that, share with the office people. If they get excited about it, they're gonna say, we gotta get this in the store. You get lucky, believe it or not, you get lucky. Now, it could be a restaurant, depending on your business. You think your product, gluten-free cookies, scale over here, there's restaurants that have a lot of desserts around it. Keep giving them samples, keep giving them care packages. Let them know that you wanna be in their restaurant and be on their menu. And you know what, it might take some time, but it really works.
And what do you mean with care package? Other than the
Sample packs. Yes.
Sample packs of your product with something else that they.
So in your case.
So she's asking what goes in the care package.
Right. And it's basically just a library of your products, like a few different flavors of your products. In your case, your non-hummus, whatever. But so you find the buyer at Wegmans or Tops or wherever, you can find them. You can kind of do your research and figure out who the buyer is. Broker will tell you a lot of times. Send them a special package, and then put your products in there, and that's it. I'm not saying you got to put a towel in there and a hat and tickets to the Sabres game.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that personal touch. It could be a note. Goes a long way because they do get products all the time.
Yeah, that's,
often.
Yeah, that's what I was reading. Sometimes you will send packages without their knowledge, and they won't end up in their hands. They will end up in some people.
What you have to do is just write a little note to them and say, I really love your stores. I think our products would do great in your stores. I want you to try them. Let me know what you think. Drop me a note. Whatever. Just trying to make that connection.
Yeah. Explain why you're sending it.
When we write personal notes, when people write into us, we really take the time to highlight us on social media. We're kind of big now. We're not huge, but we're so
not a big deal. It's okay.
Not a big deal. But we will respond to them with a handwritten note, and it blows them away. It absolutely blows them away. They will post the handwritten note on social media. I can't believe that I got this. Now buyer's not going to do that, but it means a lot to them.
Yeah.
It really helps.
And And that's a great segue into this next one. Look buttoned up, social media and word of mouth. So I have another story about that too. I love hard kombucha. It's so hard to find in store. So I ordered some from June Shine, and they go through Taproom is their distributor. So I ordered through Taproom, and it said if you have any, special requests, put it in the checkout. So I said, can you draw something funky on my box? Totally forgot that I even did it, and this thing showed up on my doorstep, and it was like all 6 sides of it were like covered with this really amazing design. Somebody just gone to town with a Sharpie marker. So what did I do? I posted it to social media. I was like, oh my God, look what these guys did to my box. It's creating, they call that surprise and delight, right? So like that's something to write down. That's a whole method of really wowing your customers, is this concept of surprise and delight. What is something that you can do that is gonna make you stand out, that handwritten note? I called Warby Parker one time because I had a question about my sunglasses, or my glasses that I ordered. A human answered the phone on the 3rd ring. I was like, did I call the right number? They were like, yeah, this is Warby Parker. I was like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting a human so fast. Surprise and delight, right? Those are wow experiences that make you remember how much you love that company, right? So
Don't
those
be afraid to cross the line a little bit. Do something extra, do something special.
Yeah.
That's how they're gonna remember you.
Yes.
It's not, status quo is just likely not gonna work.
And I would add, for better or for worse, right? We live in a world where social media is very important for discovering products and getting endorsements. Is there anything wrong with sending a care package to a social media influencer that,
that's a great idea.
that you
That's
want the attention of? I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I have found, sort of work with the company, they're surprisingly easy to get a hold of.
Yeah.
And also like very happy to be like invited to something that would cost them like $15,
Yeah.
like it doesn't, a little goes a long way.
Right.
And I'll add to that, because this week specifically, so we're launching our Everyone Bagel Hummus, and one of the folks in the office, they're driving to Ithaca tomorrow. We bought 800 bagels from the Ithaca,
Yeah, the like downtown bagel shop.
what's the bagel shop?
Yeah.
The bagel factory in Ithaca. He's gonna bring them back, we're gonna put them in care packages, 4 bagels, 4 containers of everything bagel hummus, sending them to 200 influencers. We're gonna get a ton of feedback.
Yeah.
And think of all the followers they have.
Totally.
200, even if 100 of them do something, or 50 or 25, you just hit so many thousands of people that now know.
Right.
We have an Everyone Bagel. Now, I don't wanna talk about how much that cost us, because that wasn't a lot of money.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you can scale that down. It doesn't have to be thousands. It can be, pick your 5 favorite influencers in the Rochester area, and
Right.
send them a message and just say, hey, I'm gonna send me your address. I'd love to send you some of my product for you to taste, and if you like it, and you post, I'd love for you to post something on your page. It doesn't hurt to ask those questions and just flat out ask, because influencers and user-generated content is the other thing that's absolutely huge, right? So user-generated content is posts that other people post about your company to social media. So that's what shows up in like when you're on your Instagram, you've got your main feed, and then there's sometimes a thing in the middle where your reels go, which I could go on for days about. That'll be our next thing, is reels. And then basically other posts that other people have tagged you in. When that happens, repost that, like share that information out. That's other people speaking about your brand for you on your behalf, that you can use their words for you, creates brand trust. There's, endless benefits to that. And it's why Ithaca Hummus just spent thousands of dollars and time, right? That's not even, we're talking postage costs and shipping costs, but time for somebody to pack all those boxes to get, because that's the value of doing that work to get that. So you can do it on a small scale. Start with 3, start with 5. Yeah.
I could use an example of what not to do. In our property, I was going through the freezer, and there was these beautiful pies in the freezer. There was about 6 of them. Blueberry pies and apple pies. They looked awesome, but I had no idea where they came from, what they were doing in the freezer. And so after about a week, I told one of the guys in the kitchen, I says, just raffle these off to the employees, give them away. I have no idea what they are, where they came from. I can't use them because I don't know.
Right.
Right.
where they even came from. So we gave them away. They're also looking pies. I found out later that a broker called and said, hey, did you see the pies? I dropped them off and asked them to make sure the chef saw it.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
And by the time I saw them, nobody ever delivered me a message. I had no idea where they came from. So I was like, I'm not buying a pie.
Make sure.
Give them away.
Make sure your label's on your product is the point of that. Do you have something to add? No.
Well, I was going to ask about the social media. It's like, which one works better, the Instagram or the Facebook or both?
Yeah, so it depends on where your audience is. It depends on what your product is. And honestly, it's not even just Instagram and Facebook. It's how you're using those platforms. Does TikTok make sense for you? There's a Instagram is actually prioritizing like any vertical video content on pretty much any platform is running through the roof right now because everybody who's on all these social media platforms is like, oh my god, look at TikTok's really cool. I can just scroll, and everybody's spending a bunch of time there, so all of the other social media platforms are prioritizing vertical video content. So in terms of the type of content, vertical video is what's fresh and new. In terms of the platform, Instagram is usually a pretty safe place for you to reach a wide variety of your customers, post a wide variety of content, engage with people in a meaningful way. You know, it's just highly visual, so you've got to be able to lead with strong visuals on that platform.
We have a lot of, Facebook usually is friends and family and people close. So if you're really trying to target local, maybe Facebook might be that, and you know better than I do. But I feel like my Facebook, well, nobody follows me anymore. But I feel like if I'm gonna get the word out, Facebook for me would be better because there's hundreds of people that are local.
Well, and that's why it depends so much on so many different factors of what social media platform is right for you. Because the other thing too that's really interesting is LinkedIn, right? So if you can network with buyers and, follow them and engage with their posts, you like their posts, they're gonna see your name come up. Oh, who's this? Engaging with my post, right? So, it comes down to where are your people and where are they looking for you? And spend some time thinking about that. Look at your competitors. Where are they spending their time and energy? That's a really great way, to not do, it all at the same time.
That's another good example of a follow-up. All your products are so different. Your stories are different. So
yeah,
you can get with Maureen after and say, all right, this is my product. This is what I'm trying to do. Here are my goals. And that might really kind of dial things in for you. So it could be different for everybody.
Yeah.
I just want to add something about that too. And that could be a topic for a whole other session, right? Leveraging social media for a food business. Also, you can pay people to do your social media.
Right.
Yeah.
And they do it for a living, and they do the content, they do the photography, and that's an option. It's not a free option, but I'm terrible at social media, so that's probably a negative, amount of dollars. So that is an option. If it's a very daunting idea, know that there are professionals who do that for a living.
Yeah, and student interns, right? Like, I know Mona has some experience with that. I want to go in order, Jason and then Mona. Right, Jason.
Quick thing we talked early on about this, just as an insight, about collaborating. If you make ketchup, get with a hot dog person.
Yes.
If you make whipped cream, get with the pie people.
Yes,
totally. Amplify your message and collaborate with people who have like-minded backstories or totally different. But that's a good way to amplify your message. And it's a hot topic, a collab.
Yes.
So anytime you can do that now, it's good.
Yep.
We do it all the time with chip companies, we do it with carrot companies. It's all we try to do is try to get together, co-invest in the promotion, and work with each other. Try to work off of each other.
And it doesn't have to be food people either, right? You
Right.
could be collabing with a local band because they do this or whatever. So we're seeing designers with McDonald's, so it's out there. Think outside the box. Could you talk to us a little bit about, do the rules change at all when you get sample sizes? So like if I wanted to bottle a sample of my hot sauce as an example and put those in a swag bag somewhere like you said, or and use it as a marketing material.
Right.
Is there a difference in that?
As far as
Like if he took, a hot sauce that's like this volume, the volume of that water, and he packed it this big,
you're gonna wanna put some basic information on it, and I can help you with that. And just, like, I like to put an ingredient statement on there, nutritional, depends on the volume of it. If you're putting a little shot of hot sauce on it, it's probably, everything's insignificant at the end of the day on nutritional content.
Right.
You almost have the license to do a lot with putting on an app retail.
Yeah, good point. Mona, and then we'll go here.
Thoughts on paying for influencers?
What's that?
Thoughts on paying for influencers?
Paying for influencers. So I believe in strong partnerships first, and trying for that. If you have somebody that you really want to partner with, that's really aligned with your brand, that, you know, has great metrics, and ask them for their metrics, right? Because as soon as, you know, your influencer person that's posting 5 times a week and they've got incredible engagement, and then now they're talking about a sponsored post, sometimes the engagement goes down in the tubes. It's a thing with the algorithm, it happens.
With that, do they have to, the influencer, do they have to put on their Instagram or their Facebook?
Right,
that
they
this
should
is a
disclose,
paid-
right, that it's a paid engagement, yes.
Yeah.
So that said, I do believe in paying influencers. We've done it for clients before. It is a thing. For where all of you are, start with the ask, right? Like, hey, can you help me? You know, hey, I'm a small business. If I send you free products, right? If I send you free products, right? Like, you know, I'll send you extra, and like really put some oomph and emphasis and care into what that package looks like, so that, you know, hey, Susie, thank you so much for, you know, posting on your Instagram for me. It means a lot to my business, you know, my family and my husband. Like, you know, I really appreciate your time, and please let me know how I can return the favor, right? Like, be a human, you know what I mean? But for somebody who's really big, you're gonna have to pay for it.
No, I asked the question because my very first, you know, last summer, just getting into it, I paid. And I paid a lot of money and got zero, nothing out of it. And
So
she
Mona's
showed me
saying
all her
that-
stats, she showed me everything.
Yeah.
And then I connected with a natural brand that's,
Yes.
I mean, they're in all the shelves and all the grocery stores, everything. She's like, don't ever pay for an influencer ever again. She goes, make the friendships, and you just, exactly what you said, you have the relationships and you go
Yes.
back and forth.
Right, so Mona's saying she hired an influencer last summer. It was 2 thumbs down, and then she found the right strategic partner for her that said, don't ever pay for influencers, it's all about relationships, and find the right partner for you. So I'm a little bit in the middle on that. You know, there are brands that need to pay for, you know, influencers and that kind of relationship. There's a lot of variable factors on that. I mean, it can cost thousands of dollars for you to hire an influencer, right? Especially if it's like B2B, right? I mean, there's a lot of scenarios where you have to pay a lot of money for them to leverage you. The other thing that sometimes happens is sometimes you'll reach out to an influencer, hey, if I send you a free product, will you post about me on your Instagram? And they say, yeah, sure, here's my address, and then crickets, right? So it's a risk, right? But you didn't pay for it, so you can't demand anything for it either.
If they're not passionate about the product, they want their credibility too.
Yeah,
You really
right.
gotta believe in it.
Right.
So it's not automatic.
Right.
You don't just pay them and they do
tell
it.
when there's like a sponsored post too. Right? Like, I think we're all becoming much more savvy and picking up on how genuine it seems.
Yep.
Okay, my name Hector, my English is bad, terrible.
We can understand.
Yeah.
I tried, don't try, but my wife, right now, the faith, I'm going for a park. I'm starting for a restaurant. Everybody, no enter my flavor. My flavor is my flavor. What are you doing? You flavor and in my product. You flavor it here. No enter my flavor. Okay. I work for Facebook. And Facebook. Nobody. We are nobody. Don't try it. I'm put on the free and different play, different form. You
them to try and sell to them, and they say, we don't want your product, we don't want your flavors, we have our own flavors that we serve at our restaurant, we don't want yours.
But it's the same thing, only thing is that they use it pieces of it. Like, for example,
Sure.
I had cilantro, garlic, and all that stuff, right? Put it all together and mix it in a container. They just cut it fresh, and just put it in. So we say, hey, we're gonna help you. You have less time. You have more time to cook because I have you prepared for you.
Yeah, and restaurants can be challenging for that reason, right?
And take samples and everything.
Might not be the right audience for you. It might be you need to think about, you know, a different audience. Maybe it's not restaurants. Maybe it's, you know,
I'm trying
consumer.
the Latin guy for the product Latin.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's probably tough because they're very passionate about their own product, their own recipe. And I think that, I do think the opportunity may come, because as I think we all know, labor is getting very, very hard to come by in restaurants. And those are things that take time to make. And they're gonna start looking for prepared things, because there's only so many labor hours in a day, and so may not be right now, but I'll tell you, and I know that sofrito is available through distributors. You can buy that, so it's not something that people don't buy. We actually bought it and with Estria, sofrito already prepared. So it's something that's available.
That would mix into the sauces you're making.
That we would mix into somebody's recipe, exactly. So you might find an opportunity.
Marilyn, Hector, and then other commissary members were actually having a meeting with Headwater. I don't know about this, with Chris and Seven, and they hook up with personal buyers, with restaurants, but also institutional buyers. And so what I think could be really interesting, that they showed interest in, is like buying bulk soup from Rebecca for U of R cafeteria. So Frito for their cafeteria. Again, they're feeling the labor shortages big time. So watch out, commissary members, watch out for that email.
The university is a great example of what Frank was just saying. They're looking for more and more fresh cut vegetables, IQF frozen vegetables that are prepared, ready to use, to go. And that is becoming more and more popular in restaurants too. So I think that problem is potentially going to get better.
The problem is going to get worse, I think.
I mean, yeah, but the problem
From the
is
labor
for you.
side.
For you. Exactly.
Yeah. Good. I also would imagine the margins at restaurants, meaning they what they can purchase and then still make a profit on. But you know, you don't, and I know you guys are talking about pricing too here. That obviously you don't want to not cover your costs, but for the restaurants, you know, it might not be making sense for them, or maybe you're selling it in bulk to a restaurant versus when you're at the public market, it's in smaller containers with volumes. They've got the big bag for the U of R. Yep.
The idea is that sofrito is starting for restaurants. We have for restaurants, no help. A lot of work. You play the sofrito, you put on more, it was the sauce, you put on more water, more oil. No. Only everything, vegetable, mix, a little bit of water.
And maybe trying the samples, right? Like dropping it off and leaving a small batch for them, so that, you know, with your little postcard, right? It is more concentrated than our competitors. Try it out. You know, I'll touch base again in a week. Might be something interesting to try.
But I would like to follow up with that. I have some ideas.
The CoPacking and internet is really good.
Yeah, that's
Everybody
great.
can pick out the products,
That's a good sign. You got a good product.
We have a lot more to get through, and I'm really glad that we're taking these questions, because this discussion is really the guts of the value here. But I want to move on to the next slide at least. In-store demos are great. They were not happening for a while. Most stores have them back now. So if you can do, when you get into the grocery store, if you can do an in-store demo, which means, you know, where you walk through the store and you can taste the little things on the toothpicks, those are great.
You probably know this, but when you do a demo, your velocities are through the roof. It's
So
proven
this is the
fact.
slide where we're talking about that, so talk about velocities.
excited, they wanna be in every store in the world, and it's not the way to go. You gotta be, yeah. You gotta really start small, you gotta do a very good job, and you gotta make sure that your product is selling. It's so important. And to race to getting to 1,000 stores, and then all of a sudden falling short, you're gonna lose those stores. If you don't really focus on a small amount and make sure your velocities are up there, people are continuing to buy it, you may have to refine the formula. You may have to say, you know what, it's not moving, maybe I have to make a change. But once you're comfortable, you get to a point of that comfort level and you can supply, and you're comfortable supplying that volume, then you start to creep up. But I will tell you the biggest mistake a lot of people make is like, oh my God, I just got into Publix, 1,200 stores. They usually fail miserably. It's very, very difficult to manage that because not only are you responsible for making the product, shipping the product, you're also responsible for making sure the product sells.
Right.
Don't think just because it's on the shelf, you're done. You're not.
So one of the things that one of my clients does to kind of try to get ahead of that is they hire a merchandiser. So which is basically like a college student that their job is to go around to go to these stores every week and make sure that the product looks great on the shelf. You know, they spend a couple hours, 2-3 hours, making sure that, you know, oh, well, these 4, you know, products didn't look great because it's a perishable product, right? Your job is to buy them, you know, to get them off the store shelf, right? And then understand what went wrong in the cold chain or in whatever it was that made that not work. Or let's say that that merchandiser says, you know, I went to these 5 stores and 4 of them were sold out. Now you've got an opportunity to call on those 4 stores and say, I noticed that my product is sold out on your shelf. How can I get you some more, right? All of those things, especially if you bring in a college student, bring in a marketing college student. It's a great lesson for them to understand, you know, that part of the cycle in terms of, you know, what are some of the things that they can look for. You know, it's good lessons for them and it's good information for you.
Another thing you can do is, and you might get this might be a little far away, but put IRCs on the product. If you go into a store and you're like, man, I've got 20 units left, you've got a couple days of shelf life, you can actually have instant redemption coupons with stickers. And what we do is we could have people go into stores, a broker, salesperson, or yourself, and you slap it on every one of those. It's going to cost you that redemption, but now you're getting a better chance of moving that product out. But I will tell you, it's not so much like, you know, you've already sold it.
So you're talking about like a sticker coupon that's basically that you can take this product off the shelf and bring it home for free.
Well, not well for free or like $1 off,
Right.
whatever you choose.
Yep.
And they take it off and they scan it, and that's their. And it, you know, it'll cost you that $1 for, you know, whatever it is, buy one get one free.
It's better, you know, it's better to sell even 50% off.
Exactly.
Than not, you know, not get paid for that.
Yeah. And it's not so much the money that you're getting.
Right.
You know, it's the fact that you sold all the product on the shelf.
Right.
Velocities are important.
Yeah.
If the store starts throwing product away, they're gonna have a big problem. They're gonna say, you know, well, I just keep throwing half of your stuff away. This is not working.
Right.
What's most important is you get it off the shelf, even if you have to buy yourself.
Right.
I hate to say it, it's got a day left, buy it all.
Yeah.
Get it off the shelf.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're doing this, do you have to like partner with the store, or do you just go?
For the, what do you do with the
For, like,
coupon?
the
Do you have to partner with the stores? You said?
You don't have to, but you do have to be somewhat careful of what stores and where. Usually most stores don't care. Wegmans is sensitive to it. They don't like to look like a sloppy, you know, they love their shelves looking very neat and clean. So we've put IRCs on product, and we're a while back, but, and we got a call, you know, like, why are you putting, and they work, I mean, they work fine, because it's just a universal coupon anyway.
And
But,
then the same for the merchandising, you just go into the store.
Yeah, the
Oh, yeah.
merchandising,
Slap 'em
anybody
right out
can do
there,
that. And because what you're, I mean, really that person's job is observing, right? And like moving product forward on the shelf, making sure it looks great, buying that, you know, anything that doesn't look great, you know, especially if it's perishable. But where do you get that IRC coupon?
There's a couple of companies you can use to get it set up, and they do the UPC, and then there's a redemption thing. I mean, again, you're small, and it might be costly to buy all the product, maybe that's the easier fix
Right.
short term. But the last thing you wanna do is for product to go bad at the shelf.
Yeah.
You don't want it to go out of code, you don't want it to expire.
And then you also
They're hard
want to
conversations to have.
solve the root of the problem, right? If that's happening consistently, right? So if your store is buying, you know, a ton of volume and you're going every week, you're buying, you know, half of what you sent them, you need to talk to your buyer to adjust those numbers, right? And so that's an important thing too, to solve the root of the problem. You being your own customer at every store is obviously not a.
There's a fine line there, because you do want presence on the shelf. You want a lot of product on the shelf, because it looks
Yeah,
great.
right.
You don't want a little sliver in the refrigerated case. So there's a fine line, but you know, you gotta try to work hard, whether it's social media or whatever, to try to make the product.
Okay, I have a question. You, come to Berkeley here in Rochester, and you have a product there in Berkeley. And
What is it? I'm sorry.
Ricardo's Bakery.
Oh, yeah.
in Hamilton. Our product is there, we brought them the posters, we put everything, it started to sell. I called this week and said, hey, I wanted to know how my product is doing. He said, what's that? He said, okay. This week is sold, but this week is slow. Now, we don't have expiration, you know, it doesn't have expiration, nothing like that, because it's a frozen,
Sold frozen?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's frozen, and she has it in the refrigerator. But still, it's not, I mean, it's not frozen, it's, in a refrigerator.
Okay.
Okay, how could, for example, we haven't got to that part where, you know, how long does it last? So.
Refrigerated. So you
Refrigerator.
make it, you freeze it, and then you sell it, and it be sold refrigerated.
They don't freeze it, no. It's just made and then refrigerated.
Yeah, just refrigerated.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you froze it at first.
Refrigerated.
Okay.
No, because then you wouldn't be able to freeze it at all now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, some people will make the product, freeze it, store it, and slack it out at the stores. So they'll tell the store, all right, it's your responsibility, you put it in the refrigerated section, and then you code it 5 days. I know it's gonna last 5 days refrigerated. And you let them be responsible for that. The good thing with that.
You should tell them that?
Oh,
You
yeah,
should
yeah,
tell them what the
it's
shelf
not
life
an
is.
uncommon thing,
Okay.
yeah, it's not.
I think the idea, and knowing also that, you know, the way that it works here, that it makes sense for you to take advantage of, you know, a 4-hour shift here.
Yeah.
Make as much as you can, freeze it.
Right.
Yes.
And then you have it either, you know, stored in the freezer here, or stored in the freezer at Ricardo's, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But in the freezer.
In the freezer, because then your ticking time bomb, that is your product expiration date, when it's in the freezer, it's frozen, stops, timer stops.
Yeah,
when
as
it's
long
in the
as the
freezer.
quality is okay. I don't know
Right.
your product that well, so as long as you're comfortable with it, freezing and slacking.
Yes.
But you know, you do have to do that shelf life though, study.
Yeah.
And that's important. It's
Yeah,
something
and
yeah.
For now.
And
That's
you
the
can,
one out.
I mean, to start though, for that being small, can't she just taste it in 5 days? Taste it in 10 days?
Well,
Well, what I'm doing is, the last time that we did the inspection, I took an example home, and I check it every day. I see how it is, the
Right.
texture, and stuff like that. And up to now, we have like a month and a half, and it's still good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you think it's still good.
Well,
That
well,
doesn't mean
yeah,
that there isn't bacteria in there that
Okay.
could be harmful. And the reason why I say that is because you told me you don't cook your product. There's a little risk there. You're not doing anything basically that helps
kill
me
the
be comfortable
bacteria.
with like.
Well, but it's, don't you have vinegar in it?
It
Or
has
lemon or
oil,
lime?
it has oil and salt.
Oh, yeah,
That's for
salt.
7.
See, what, you probably don't know what the pH of the product is, the acidity. So that's, we could talk about that.
Yeah, so Elizabeth has something.
What I was going to mention to her is the pH. If you don't know the pH, your pH, then you don't know how long it will last. The
Right.
lower your pH, it's a little bit more hard for bacteria to grow on. Because if somebody buys it and gets sick, and you don't, I mean, depends how your preparation of your, you can get sued. Somebody can die. So you do have to have the shelf life. You have to know the pH, you have to know how it is, and you always, I don't know, you have to have the best by week. Even if you think that it's in a year, or your best by day, it's in.
Yeah, just want to be sure you're covered. You can do that. Are you a member here? Oh, perfect.
So the best buy thing that you spoke of, is that something Cornell can give you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Shelf
know,
life.
You're exactly, and it depends on the product, you know, and it depends on how you process your product. I will tell you, your products will probably last longer than you and I will be alive. Because the pH is so low, and it's just, that's the nature of those products. You
And just
cook
so
it,
we know,
low
what do you say,
pH,
really low pH, very acidic?
very acidic. And the likely, you know, nothing's gonna grow in that. you can leave it out in the sun. But it is really product dependent. But a few things that I heard from you concern me a little bit. You know, you don't do anything to treat it. You don't cook it. I don't know what the pH is. If it's high, the problem is the higher the pH, the less likely it's going to taste bad. But it actually will be bad. That's a low acid product.
Interesting.
That's what's scary. So when somebody says I have an acid product, then I know when it's good or bad because I can taste it. They're right. High acid products do taste bad when they go bad. Low acid products do not. And that's where you have a botulism risk.
Yep.
You can't taste it, you can't smell it, it can make you very sick. And the other unfortunate thing is when somebody buys your product and they get sick for whatever reason, they may go back to the store and say, I ate this. And now you're on the hook, like shit, you're a part of this person's sickness. It might not have been your product, but they're gonna start asking you questions and it's like, no. So it's, we can talk about it. We'll get you set up.
We're gonna go into pricing strategy a little bit later. We talked about velocities. I feel like we've at least dabbled in these. I wanna move on just because we have so much left to cover. So we're gonna talk about packaging a little bit. I thought this was an interesting kind of example to put up here for you. This is the progression of Ithaca Hummus packaging. So what it looked like, this is the founder's wife, right? And what the table looked like at the farmer's market. Just so cool, right? And so then the evolution of the packaging, do you have any knowledge? Can you talk at all about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, so we started off, this is where Chris was making it in a little food hub, literally with ice cream scoop. And it had a very short shelf life, 7 days, that was it. And he kept working with Cornell to increase it. What do I need to do? How clean do I need to be? We got it as high as 28 days. That's a long time for a refrigerated product of hummus. But it really still isn't enough to win the battle at the retailer, you know, because you need a pretty long. So he actually was my customer, came to Industry, we put in some equipment, high pressure processing. We moved in.
Some equipment. This equipment it's from like here to the end of like the it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll talk to you guys about it. They're using it actually now. It's high pressure processing. It's using an unbelievable amount of pressure, 87,000 pounds. It's cold. When you put the package in there, the container sealed, it applies the pressure and it kills the bacteria. It's amazing. Not using heat or anything. That's why our hummus is so fresh tasting. The lemon comes out, the flavors. We don't cook it. And a lot of other hummus manufacturers do. That's why we evolved into a package that was HPP, withstand that. Now we've tested as far out as 150 days on our shelf life now. That's what that process goes with. That's actually we haven't even been doing that. So anyways, Ann was Chris's one and only employee that didn't get paid anything.
So, like I mentioned, we do packaging design, one of the things that we do at 29 Design Studio, so I wanted to talk through a couple of examples. And actually, this suite right here is really interesting. We just finished rolling this out, so these are brand new. They just got finished being developed. So, Leap Foods grows mushrooms. Blue oyster, lion's mane, shiitake mushrooms. They grow them regenerative, organic, in basically a warehouse in Scottsville. So then they took the blue oysters and they freeze them and then they roast them and then they put them into burgers and sausages, which developed these SKUs. So they brought in a co-packer to do this. The only thing that they contribute to this blended burger product is mushrooms. Palmer's co-packs it for them. They bring the Angus beef, and so it's literally 2 ingredients: Angus beef, blue oyster mushroom, and lion's mane mushroom. Technically 3. On that guy, blended burgers. When it came to the sausages, we got a different USDA reviewer because packaging like this that goes on the shelf had to go through USDA. There's all sorts of rules. It was a fucking nightmare. Like, you gotta have the line around the nutrition panel. There's all sorts of hoops to jump through. Those rules are laid out somewhere. You can read them step by step, right? If you want to embark on that. But the interesting thing about USDA is it really depends on what reviewer do you get for your product. So this one, we were allowed to say blended burgers. We were not allowed to put the word blended on the sausages because that reviewer said, no thank you, you're not allowed to do that. So it was funny because when we co-packed this with Palmer's, we co-packed those with Artisan Meats out of Canandaigua. guys saw this, they were like, how come you guys put blended on that product? We were like, I don't know, different reviewer, I guess. So, but also you have to be able to back up every single thing that you put on your package. So in this, for example, the way that they grow these mushrooms, they have 100% of your daily intake of vitamin D because of the way that the mushrooms are grown. So that was huge for us to be able to put on the package. One serving of one of these blended burgers is 210% of your daily value of vitamin D. Where did we get that information? From Cornell, through these processes that we're talking about that you guys can go through for a pretty cost-effective way to be able to put those metrics on your packaging. This is the back of those chicken sausage labels, and they are 100% daily value of your vitamin D per serving, and 40% fewer calories and 80% less fat than USDA data for comparable chicken sausages. So we had to validate that claim. We had to be able to pull the numbers for I think we pulled like 10 information of the calories and the fat for comparable chicken sausage products. When we submitted to the USDA, we had to back up all of that data. Every single thing that you put on your package, you have to be able to back up with information you can prove. Organic, blended, vitamin D, gluten-free, all natural, all of those things, you have to be able to prove every single one of them. What's the other thing I was going to say about this? That was a big deal, but complain about that?
They are all facts, and health claims are sketchy.
Oh, I was going to say about trust.
Give an
It's just
example.
that's
Give an
sketchy.
example of something that's common that would make a buyer go, I don't want to touch it.
Right. So, like, if you're making health claims, if you're saying that we thought at one point that these were high in, I can't remember what it was. Let's say amino acids. Unless you can prove it, you cannot put it on the label. You cannot put it on the package. And there will be some things that a buyer sees, like, will guarantee to make you lose weight, or, guaranteed to taste better, or something like that. There's gonna be things that you will never see on a package because it's not provable. Proven. Able to be proven.
I will tell you another thing up with allergens, because they're a big deal.
Yes.
Top 8 allergens and stuff.
Yes.
People think if they put a disclaimer on their label that says made in a factory that's made with peanuts, or made in a factory that also contains shellfish or something, that statement is not protected. What it does is it's going to hopefully keep somebody with a shellfish allergy from eating it. It's going to lessen your risk, but it does not protect you in any way. The only way you can protect yourself is if it's in the ingredient statement and you say it and it's really there.
Right.
There was a company that got so tired of it and had all these allergens in their plant. They're like, I want to put this on there because I'm, made in a factory with all these 8 allergens. And they're like, well, you can't do it. It's not going to protect you. There was a company that actually made a little packet that contained, and then you can't legally put the ingredient in your ingredient statement. It's not part of the formula. So what they did was they made a little packet with all 8 allergens in it. They added it to the formula and then added every single one of those 8 allergens. So that's how they were covered. They put it in the ingredient statement. They added it in this little tiny packet. Didn't add any flavor, but that was the way they protected themselves.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
But that to me is a very sloppy manufacturing plant that can't control, have allergen control.
Right.
According to, like other hammers, they have to put the warning now for this is an allergy.
To eating, you have to put sesame on it. It's actually a recommendation right now, but it's gonna eventually become mandatory. Yeah, they're gonna give you some time to update it.
So I wanted to show this suite as an example of how you expand out a product line. So this company, they're an apple grower based in the Hudson Valley. They came to us and said, we talked to Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's wants us to bring them a small honey 2-pound pouch bag of Honeycrisp apples. The target customer is young professionals, and we want something that's going to be attractive to a young professional who wants to buy a 2-pound bag for them. Mom and dad can bring them to work, and the kids can go in the kids' lunches. They're small, very small handheld apples. So we started with the little honeys. They did so well in retail that they came back to us a couple of years later and they said we want to do all of them. And so we expanded out the product line with the same conceptual look and feel to other bag designs that worked along that suite. Yep, and then used color Yeah, so that you can see the sweet on the shelf and understand that this is not the same as this, right? I want to be able to visually tell the difference between the products. So this is kind of an interesting example. So Real Eats is a meal delivery service company. They're based down in Geneva. They sell direct to consumer, and so they're not on a retail shelf. They don't have to go through a lot of the rigmarole that these guys did with USDA approvals because they sell direct to consumer, and they're not going through somebody else, you know, where there's all these legal rules of the distributor and the buyer and the broker and the retailer and the customer, you know, all of that stuff. They're just going, we sell it, it's our responsibility. So they still have to have the nutrition facts and everything like that, but we don't see like a UPC code. We don't see a lot of the other things that we saw in the other packaging, right? So you still gotta have the basics. What is the product? Who is the company? What are the benefits? This says no preservatives, no GMOs, responsibly sourced and 100% real, you know, calorie count, gluten-free tag. A lot of that stuff in terms of the front of the packaging is similar to what we saw in some of the other examples, but you're not gonna have the rest of the stuff that's necessary on the back like you might need on a USDA.
That's who we refer to.
Yeah.
I don't think we have many people who are at that point yet.
So there's
Where you
yeah. So their AID is one that I've used in the past. They're really good with baked goods. They'll do a nutritional panel for just about anything. They'll help you spell out what your ingredient statement looks like. So you have your ingredients, you know what? Just make sure that whatever you're using, like if you're using a hot sauce as an ingredient, you're gonna wanna make sure they know it's in that hot sauce, because that becomes a part of the food.
Right.
But anyways, and then you need to get an understanding of how many servings there are in your pack.
Right, what is the serving?
So obviously a bag of apples has a lot of sugar, well, the serving size is probably one apple, and they're gonna write that ingredient statement on one apple.
Right.
One apple of sugar.
Yep.
So Frito will be 2 tablespoons. So it's, again,
Right.
stuff we can help with when you're ready to do
Yeah.
it.
And you can also control how your panel looks based on what the serving size is, right? So actually that was something that we went through with the blended burgers for Leap, was when we were comparing the health benefits basically of what we claim with the blended burgers compared to something like an all meat, like an all plant-based Impossible Burger type product. We were looking at calorie count, saturated fat, sodium, you know, some things like that, compared to a serving size of an Impossible Burger, but you had to do some math because the weight was not the same. So we very intentionally served these as 1/3 pound burgers instead of 1/4 pound burgers because we liked the way the nutritional panel looked better, you know, with those figures. I just want to point this out. I know it's really small, the screen is really far away. That is that allergen statement that Frank was just talking about. This says contains milk and soy. So it gets attached right to that ingredient deck and it comes naturally right after. That's where, you know, the customer typically goes to find it in terms of what those allergens are.
And they added that extra, so now they've said it twice, basically.
Right.
It's in the ingredient statement, but they also spell out to make it easy for someone.
Is that a requirement now? Because I think when I was looking at labeling, I'm not sure if like having that small bold statement at the bottom was required. Is that a requirement now?
For the 8 top allergens, I think it is.
I didn't think it was. I think it's been something we should find out for sure. I haven't done one in a while, but if you gotta be careful, sometimes you're using ingredients like casein, that's milk.
Right.
And so some people just don't know that it's milk. And so if an ingredient statement says casein in it and you don't put milk in parentheses after it, then absolutely, you gotta put it somewhere. You gotta say contains milk. So there's certain things that, like sesame, somebody said sesame, or tahini for sesame. So yeah, they're eating.
I was going to suggest, if you guys don't know what to put on your label, go to the FDA. It says it has a, it's FDA and they put labels, they will tell you what label has to have. There's certain things that it must have, and certain things that you can, like you can claim spices and you can put a certain amount of things, but
Exactly,
there's
yep.
some things that they're not considered as spices, so you have to put it on your label.
Right. So just so everybody heard that, you're saying you can go to the FDA website, it'll ask you what's in your product, right? Or you can list out what you have and it'll tell you what the limits are for spices compared to actually listing out the spices, this much they talked about UPCs and SKUs earlier. You wanted to make the point about units versus case packs.
Yeah, so the website Laura was talking about, when you go and you buy a family of UPC numbers, they're gonna have the first 5 are gonna be the same. That's your family. And
The first 5 digits.
digits, right. And then the second set of numbers, they'll change, you know, they'll just keep going up. You'll have 6 in a row, or I don't know what the deal is. You buy a packet, you can buy 1, or I think you gotta buy like 50 or something.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Once you get a UPC number, right below it, you can check a box that says, well, I'm gonna make a case of 12 of these. And it actually creates another UPC for the case. So when you sell your product in a case, now you have what you're selling as a UPC of a case of product, and you'll also have the individual UPC for the stores to scan. So it'll generate an automatic case UPC. As long as you check it.
We talked about what you can claim and label, accuracy, nutrition. I think we touched on too. That's the point about, you know, if it has X% of this, you have to be able to prove it. Is packaging easy to open? And I actually wanted to make that point about this. Designed intentionally, it's open on both ends, so it's just an open sleeve, which saved us so much money in terms of the way that was produced, because it was significantly more cost effective. It was cheaper, right? Like to make, because it could just pop open and there was no like thing that came to close on the side. So the product just sits in there and, you know, sits on the shelf in that way. But like if somebody buys your product, how annoying are those plastic things, right? Where you buy like a pack of scissors and it's encased in plastic that has the hard plastic thing all the way around. I don't want to buy scissors ever in my life because the thing I need to open the pack with is yeah. So just kind of think about that. Sustainability, you know, we talked about that a little bit, but you want to think about, you know, is biodegradable packaging an option? Is there a way that I can use recycled or recyclable packaging in the development of this? You know, can I use sticker paper that's, you know, sourced ethically, something like that? So you want to think about that. And the reason why, you know, I underline trust here is because when you violate, especially these kind of top ones here, nutrition and what you can claim and accuracy in terms of what on the packaging, if your customer or especially your buyer starts to not trust you, accuracy of what you're claiming, the information that you're sharing, you know, it doesn't look or sound legit, like, ooh, you know, you're saying that this is proven to help someone lose weight, Hydroxycut, which is like the leading diet pill, can't even say that, right? So I don't trust you if you have that on your packaging, and now I'm gonna wonder, you know, what else I can't trust about you and your company. So trust goes a super long way. Cost, passing the time to you for this one.
Cost, so what should your margins be? Everybody always wonders, man, how much can I sell this for? What's my cost? What can I do to make that, improve on that? So I'm gonna give you the very high level, 10,000 feet. Typically, you're almost doubling the cost of the product every time it hits another spot. So you just made something for 50 cents, you wanna sell it for $1. 50% margin is pretty good. It may sound like a lot, it's not. You'll eat through that 50 cents in no time with all the expenses they get. So that's a good rule of thumb. Try to hit that 50%. Now, if it hits call it a distributor's gonna be negotiable, but they're gonna want 20, 30, 40% margin, so now you've gotta add that. And then when it hits the retailer's gonna want 50% margin. So you can already see how this price is escalating very quickly. If you can go direct to the store, great. You know, you're selling it for $1, you've made your 50 cents, they're gonna sell it for $2. That's usually how it works, but now it's an art. The whole thing is an art. You know that. So I will tell you though that you have to really educate yourself on your product and the category. Because if you're selling something, if you're selling a bag of apples, well, I can't use apples, it's not a recipe, a hot sauce. And you know, it costs you $3 to make that hot sauce, and you just sold it for $6, and now they've got to sell it for $12. And every other hot sauce on the shelf is $5.99 or $4.99.
Right.
It ain't gonna work. You have to really start thinking about those numbers and how to make them work. And you may have to start taking a lower margin.
Right.
Knowing that eventually you're gonna get to a place where I can eventually get this down to $1 or $2, but I don't wanna lose the opportunity, and I don't wanna miss the opportunity, and I wanna be sure that it sells. And so you might have to take a hit, so don't expect the higher margin in the beginning, if that's what the category is dictating. I will tell you though, if your product costs 25 cents, and you can sell it for, well, we'll say 50, and then they sell it for $1, and every other one is $4.99, well shit, sell it for $2.50.
Yeah.
Make as much margin as you can, as
Right.
long as it fits the category.
Right.
So be smart. I mean, our hummus is about $1 more than sour. That's the mainstream, that's the cheap stuff. It's about $1 more. That's probably the most we're gonna be able to ask for a premium product. Somebody's gonna buy sour for $3.99 or ours for $4.99, yeah, we can convince people to spend the extra buck. It's reasonable, right? We're not gonna be able to sell that for $7.99. I mean, maybe somewhere, but it's just.
And
it's a nice
also,
reward.
in terms of that too, in terms of sweet spot, it's what is the price tolerance for the product that you're trying to sell, and also what is the sweet spot in terms of I can sell 500 of them at $5.99, or I can sell 100 of them at $7.99. You're making more money with the lower price because you're selling more of them. So you really got to think about that side of it too, in terms of volume as that relates to the price.
That end retail price is very, very important to establish. You wanna try to maintain that.
Yeah.
You don't wanna go to Wegmans and say, oh, I'll give you this price, you're gonna sell at this price, and then Tops is here, and then, you know, Honeyway Market is here, and you gotta be careful with that.
But that said, one of the things that you can do to try and convince the retailer to take your product and put it on their shelf is offer an incentive. So if you put this on your shelf, I will eat $1 of the cost so that you can basically, I'm betting on me. So you know, I have so much confidence in my product that I will eat $1 of this product so that you can have more confidence in selling it through, and we'll come and circle back in 3 months and see how your sales are, and then you're gonna take that $1, right? So that's one thing. Another thing I've seen some in conversations with buyers too is for the food producer to say, I will buy, especially if it's perishable, I will buy everything you don't sell back. That's a thing you can do too, especially if it's perishable, right? So like, you know, I know that this only has a 5-day shelf life. At the end of the 5 days, you know, I'll pay all the shrinkage. Shrinkage is lost, right? So I'll buy that back from you, reduce it from your, you know, invoice or whatever it is. So that's another thing too that you can, an incentive that you can offer.
So everybody's situation is very different, and that's something that we'll continue to help you with. So if you have a scenario, call me, you know, we can talk through it, depending on the product, what they're asking for. They may ask you to fund 4 promotions a year, that's pretty normal. You're gonna have to give them $1 back, they're gonna run a special, but that actually helps with velocities.
Right.
So there's programs that you can consider with them to try to help you.
What do you mean with some promotions? Like you can give it things for good ready, or do it every day done?
Well, so like Publix, for example, there's no talking your way out of it. They do 4 buy one get one frees every year.
Oh, that's the one.
Every time we run a buy one get one free at Publix, it costs us $100,000.
Buy one, get one free.
They sell a ton of volume, and all of a sudden, it's buy one get one free. They sell all this free product, and then lose a ton of money. But they got us on for that.
So we have, where is it sold in the store, creating customer demand, and what to do once you're on the
Placement
shelf.
in the store. I mean, I've talked to people who have a universal product that'll do anything from shining the car to going on a hot dog. It's like, well, you can't really, you gotta really dial in what it is and where you want it in the store. And you can't go into a buyer. All buyers represent different areas of the
Right.
store. You have to be confident. You have to know where it's gonna go. Sometimes you get lucky and they cross merchandise and they'll put it in different areas. But you have to be very specific. You have to know when somebody's shopping for a product like yours, where are they gonna find it? And sometimes when people get too universal, it gets lost.
Yeah.
And so you might think you're doing people a favor, and the problem is it's hard to sell it because it's hard to find.
I know we have a lot of cultural products in the room, so I don't want to skip over this, but there's the ethnic aisle, right? The ethnic section of the grocery store compared to where the rest of the products are. So sometimes there are shelf fees that you can pay to get into the grocery store. You know, I'll pay you a fee, right, for you to take my product in and put it on the shelf. And the fees in the ethnic aisle are less than they would be if you're in the general section of the store because the traffic is less, right? So that's something to kind of think about too. And it really goes back to a lot of what, when it comes to that decision, it's what Frank is talking about. Where is the consumer going to go to find your product? Because it's more than, we're talking about ethnic, we're also talking about what about the health and nature's marketplace section? We got a gluten-free product. Where is somebody going to go to find that? They might find it in the general population, right, of the products that are in the store. But if they're specifically looking for gluten-free, they're going to look in the gluten-free section of the store.
The good news is there's a lot of really good gluten-free sections now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one thing.
But if your product is just naturally gluten-free and you choose to be in the gluten-free section, you might miss opportunities in the mainstream area.
Right. We talk about this, that perfect granola
really thought to be on the mainstream shelves.
Right.
You find granola bars and
Yeah.
this granola.
And that was huge for them. So Perfect Granola, when they went into retail for the first time, they went into that like health section of the store, and they really fought and talked to their buyer and the person at the grocery store a lot to say, get me over there. I want to be where the rest of the stuff is, where people buy their granola bars next to the cereal, because she knew that that's where people were looking for that. And ultimately, she got there. She's there in Walmart and a number of stores. But so it's also, you've got to advocate. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to know, what kind of velocities and sell-through you have and things like that to convince that buyer to take a chance on you and move you to the other section of the store.
I would say if your product is typically gluten-free, your competitors don't be in the gluten section.
Right.
Be with everybody
Like
else.
it's naturally
If you're making cookies or you're doing something where people are looking specifically for a gluten-free version, that's
Yeah.
what goes in my opinion. Right, something that's usually has gluten in it, right?
Right. Yeah.
I will tell you, we used to be in the nature's marketplace in Vikings. When we went into the mainstream dairy case, our sales were 10 times. We sold way more product in mainstream, dairy case versus the specialty case.
I think we talked about all of these and we're out of time. What you do once you're on the shelf with the product, I think we talked about some of these too. Like this is, it's a little hard to see. This is a shelf talker. So this is a special like little dangler thing that sits in the channel of the, where the price tags go, and it sits and like dangles out so that when the customers walk by, they, catches their eye. So you can do some of those. You got to get the retailer permission for that. We talked about the IRCs. That's something you can do to move, thinking creatively. Is it more than retail stores? Can it go into a restaurant? Can it go into a bakery? Right? You start there.
Those are great to put like local on it. So somebody sees it, so it's local, great on my own.
Yeah. This was Wegmans. They picked up Leap Foods shiitake for the first time, and they had already had the other two SKUs. So this was a new shiitake to highlight that in particular. Velocities. I know we talked about that a number of times. That's super important. I could not emphasize more how important it is to watch Shark Tank. Like you can see how other people pitch their product. You can see how like they're gonna ask the tough questions about the numbers. Like, tell me how much does it cost for you to make? How much do you sell it for? How much are you selling? What's your, it's super fast paced. That's a great thing for you to watch and learn. And we zoom through some of this stuff.
I will tell you, Shark Tank, a lot of you probably know this, if you watch it. A lot of those deals that get a deal on the show don't actually become deals.
Right, they don't close after the doors.
So you read about a lot of those that there was some information that was incorrect or something.
Yeah.
Well, that was a lot.
All right, I feel like we've got to get your run.